All right, so we should be live now, or it's preparing to go live. So I'm gonna just work on getting the stream up here, and I think people will start to slowly come in. Let's see. So as people start to slowly enter the stream, I'm here with Erik Myers tonight. Thank you, Erik, for coming and hanging out with me and my channel.
Glad to be here. Very glad to be here.
Thank you. So the goal of tonight is I want to ask you some questions about yourself and get to know you a little bit, and have you introduce yourself a little bit to my audience. We're definitely going to, I'm sure, have a bunch of questions about PWCC, the sports card market, maybe the Pokemon card market too, just the card market in general. I think we'll have a great discussion. I do want to just note for my audience, on my end, I'm having a little bit of camera issues for Erik in terms of it kind of coming in and out. We've tried to kind of problem solve around that. I'm not sure what people are going to see in the chat. You guys can certainly let me know if it's an issue, if it's not an issue, but I still can hear Erik well. So I think we're just going to kind of go for it. But to start, Erik, if you could just introduce yourself a little bit, what's been your history in the card collecting community, the various things you've sort of been a part of, over your career?
Yeah. So I've been in the card collecting industry for about 15 years. At 15 years ago, it's 5-figure level. After about, year 1 and 2, then it went into the 6-figure level collecting. And I initially started with vintage baseball, older football, and outside of Jordan, I didn't do any basketball, right, at all. And I kind of hung out in that wheelhouse for a few years, and then eventually gravitated towards predominantly more basketball, because globally it's a bigger sport. The Asian market drives a lot of what we do. So I eventually gravitated to majority of basketball. However, I still have a huge passion and love for vintage baseball. So that's been very keen in my life. There's no shortage of 6- and 7-figure cards that I've owned or sold. So I've been very blessed in that opportunity to really enjoy this hobby at the highest level. I'm extremely grateful for everything that's been put on my plate up until this moment in life, right? So I'm just excited about what's to come next.
Yeah. Can you talk to me a little bit about, so a couple of things I know about you. One, can you just talk a little bit about your job or your work with PWCC right now, and what you do at that company? And I guess after that, I'd love to hear about, some of your Kobe card collecting experiences. And that's kind of how I first saw you in a couple of videos talking about that.
Yeah. So I'm an account liaison at PWCC. So I help people with their accounts in any way that they need help. A lot of people just are curious about maybe which direction to go in, what cards in their portfolio that they might need to move or to acquire, help them acquire assets that they're looking for. Sorry. No, bless me. So, yeah, there's just a multitude of issues, right? And a lot of it's customer service based, right? So a lot of it is customer service based issues, but it's more than a customer service rep, because it's really a lot more in depth. You have to think some of these people have 6 and 7, 8-figure portfolios, right? So the amount of interaction time you spend with them is personal, right? This is a lot of, maybe you talk to people 3, 4, 5 times a week on the phone about just a multitude of different things. Trends, upcoming auctions, previous auctions, some of it's speculation, not so much, but just a multitude of different things. So the account liaison is basically the essence of a money market manager to a certain degree, as you might have in stocks. Somebody who assists you with your liquid portfolio in stocks.
And how long have you been working for PWCC, and where would you say you are in sort of the hierarchy of, decision making and people over there?
PWCC, thankfully, they do ask a lot of their employees for advice and feedback, because a lot of the employees are in the market, whether there's somebody like me who has a multi-million-dollar collection, or some people in the employees are just bust wax and they might deal in $100 cards. Nevertheless, they're all ingrained into the industry and market. Some of them do Pokemon, some do Magic, some do sports, some do just golf. So they ask for a lot of feedback. So thankfully, PWCC, they're really looking for, they get a good pulse in the market. Because remember, they're an auction house, over 120 employees. Their pulse is at a different rate and level than the actual market, right? So they get to see trends and maneuvers, but what is the feedback, right? It's hard to understand feedback just by looking at data and analytics. Thankfully, the owners and executives there are very interested in what the market's opinion is. So that's grateful for that. Where I'd put me up there, I'm a sales liaison. I mean, I guess mid-tier, maybe a little above mid-tier. You know, I mean, I'm very grateful. I got a decent salary and I provide a lot of revenue for the company, you know, but all the employees at PWCC are, man, they're passionate. A lot of these people work 5, 6, sometimes 7 days a week, just trying to help the company, you know?
So I guess, maybe before we jump into more PWCC questions, and as people start to come in, we have about 30 or so people in the chat now. I think more people will find the video as it goes, and definitely will have questions about the whole PWCC eBay incident that, you know, we can talk about a little bit, and get sort of your take and opinion on what you're willing to share. What has been your experience, you know, over 15 years in the sports card market? If you were to give us sort of a overview of the last 15 years, of some of sort of the ups and downs in the market, and you know, an overall view, what would you say? I'd be interested to hear.
One of the most important things, man, that I could say is, you really got to do it because you love it. If all you're doing is trying to make money, dude, it's going to be a bumpy ride. It can be. And more importantly than that, you got to have something you would do for love in life, whether you made money on it or not. That's kind of what I liked about cards. Like, there are cards that I would own just for the love of them, right? If I broke even in a couple of years, I'm okay with it. Of course, nobody wants to be handed their hat and lose their entire monetary investment. I don't wish that upon anybody, but I think people need to focus more on doing it for the love of whatever their niche is, whether it's hockey, baseball, Magic, Pokemon, whatever it is. Do it because you love it. Let the money be the secondary focus at all times. At all times, then the primary focus. Because what happens is, if it's not, it's going to get volatile. It could get somewhat corrupt. Hopefully it doesn't. And at the end of the day, if it collapses, it's not, I promise you, the industry won't collapse if it's love driven, right? Yeah. I promise you there's going to be less bear markets if it's a love driven industry and hobby, right? And encourage the new people not to just be flipping cards or stuff to that effect, if you will, but learn about whatever it is you're doing. If you're into F1, learn about the drivers. What's the history of Ferrari? What's the history of Mercedes? I mean, so I love vintage baseball, even though most people know me for my Kobe collection and my basketball collection, but I'm a big vintage baseball passionate enthusiast. I study about players. I study about the origins of baseball bats, the ball. What was the difference in the pre-1920 dead ball era? I read a lot about the Negro League players. I'm just in depth about each one of them. I really am a lover of and what I do. What I'm involved in. It's not just buy cards, grade cards, sell cards, try to make profit. I'm really ingrained into what I do. And the best part is, I'm really grateful that I get to make money doing this. Because I can make money, I don't have to go broke, right? That's one thing. But I can continue to learn. I look at the money as just an opportunity for me to keep doing what I love to do, to learn this stuff, you know? And most of up until I worked at PWCC, up until me working at PWCC, less than a year ago, I'd have been in this 15 years. This is important. I think people understand. Not everybody has to do what I do. I have always held a regular job and did cards on the side. I never put myself in a situation where I needed to be profitable on cards in any form or fashion to survive, right? I never did that. I allowed myself to use this as a secondary form of income. And again, teach his own. But it really helped me maintain the love and pure passion for the industry. Plus, it allowed me to come in and out of the industry if I wanted to, and allowed me to, because I see people who make who got in this past 18, 24 months, came in 5, 10, 15 grand. Now they're worth $250,000 in the portfolio. And some of them are kind of young. I don't know if they truly comprehend how much that money really is in the rest of the world, right? Like most people will never have 6 figures in the bank account. They'll never have 6 digits, they just won't. They'll never have 110, 140,000 liquid in their account. Most Americans or any country will be born, live, and die and never have that in their account, ever. They need to really value that. And that's why I've always kind of worked. That's why I've always worked. That way I still stay attached to reality, no matter how much money I make on cards a month.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a great message. I think that, for everyone out there kind of watching this and people who watch and engage in this channel, they all come from, potentially slightly different places. We're going to have people who they're interested in a financial sort of collecting channel like this because they want to be engaged. They enjoy it. It's entertaining and engaging, but they also want to learn so that they can spend money on items that are either going to go up in the future or are going to retain value, or at least get items, buy as many items as they can that are going to be really enjoyable. And so making those like smart financial purchases, we could say. But I think it can so easily, through that sort of intense focus on the money, whether that's, and I had some really interesting questions for my Patreon this month on that anxiety about buying for fear of losing, right? And where it can become so much about the money that you're really removed from enjoying the cards and enjoying the process. And for me, it's about the cards, but it's also about the friendships and the people you meet and the relationships and being a dealer and all these types of things and being part of this community and shared hobby. I mean, a big part of the joy of any hobby, not any hobby, because there are a lot of hobbies you can do solo, but lots of hobbies where you do them with other people, is the shared experiences. And so I think it's such an important topic of how do you manage making those sort of, calculated financial decisions as you go along as a business. If people are watching who are, running this as a business or doing it as a side business, like you may have done, or don't ever plan to sell anything, but just want, are putting this money into this instead of maybe putting it in the stock market where it might go up more. And then that money could be used for their kids. And they're trying to figure out, like, does that make sense? Is that a fair thing to do for my family? So it's all sorts of big, issues, but it's I'm so glad you started the conversation with some of those points about the love. And for someone who's been doing it as long as you, just talking about how probably important that has been, and how so I guess my next question is, how have you managed to still be in love with the cards 15 years later? And are there things that you sort of, recommend? You talked about one, I think, which was engage in the history, right? Be a learner. So it's a lifelong learner and always learning new things. So you don't probably get bored or stale with that. So it sounded like that was one, but what else would you suggest for people? Because you've been doing this so much longer. I've been doing this for about 6 years now, 5.5, 6 years. A lot of people in this chat, I think, have been here like 1 year and doing this 1 year, so what would you say? Because I think the majority of people who are watching this channel and attracted to this channel are very passionate about the hobby too, and want that love and connection in their collecting and their business. So they're interested in that sort of message and how to achieve that.
Yeah, how to stay connected and passionate, that's really up to each individual to decide. Me, I bounce from things to things.
Okay.
I might be passionate about basketball for 6 months or a year, do a lot of research and learn about players and the history of like how the NBA and ABA merged together, how things were in the 50s and 60s, the relevance of certain players, like why was George Mikan relevant in the 40s and 50s in the NBA? and then I'll roll to football or just. So my niche is sports, right? That's kind of what, but a genre of sports, right? A multitude of them. And I just follow what my heart likes, right? And like you said, and it's not just cards. Most people don't know that I'm very passionate about art. I'm a Renaissance era man. So you look at the Medici period from maybe the mid to late 1300s up to the mid 1500s. So I travel to Italy as often as possible, or anywhere there's maybe a Rembrandt, so I'm passionate.
My father's an art collector, interestingly, and is extremely passionate about art, and, has been teaching me about art and getting me semi-interested. And it's something I could see myself later in life becoming more interested in, interestingly. So
I think it's and this is just me, to each his own. I think it's a moral imperative for you just to be a seeker of knowledge about life.
Yeah.
And don't allow it to make you become decisive in one form or other. Just allow yourself to be a seeker of knowledge. And that's kind of what I use the cards industry for. Is it allows me to stay ingrained into humanity. It allows me the opportunity to digest and to deconstruct my psyche in the process, how I interact with people, how I bargain, the marketplace. Usually they break down into what I would call Aristotelian first principles theory. Most things are broken down. If you break them down to Aristotle's first principle theory, it's a derivative, an Aristotelian principle from Aristotle, right? Most things at their simplistic form do have a first principles theory base. So it allows me to deconstruct it from that angle. And it allows me to stay in a human interaction mentality, but from a passionate level. Because when you're buying and selling cryptocurrencies or stocks, it's very dead, right? It's clicks of buttons. You might not care about Pfizer. You might not care about Amazon, Apple. You might hate Dell Computer or Microsoft. And you're just buying stocks. It's really not personal to you. You can make a living, and I strongly support you do that if that's something you're good at or you want to do that. But the card market allows me to learn and to make money, but also have human interaction. There's very few, other than the niche alternative collectibles, video games, coins, comics, whatever, there aren't a lot of things that we are passionately can potentially become profitable and still have social human interaction in the world. And it can be capitalism at its ugliest, but it also can be capitalism at its finest, because it's one-on-one basis, right? It's, you have something I like, I have something you like, and let's meet in the middle somewhere, and we walk in faith, and we're both getting a good deal, So then that in of itself is its own thing. Make sure you're treating somebody fair, right?
I'm interested to hear, because, about the sports card world, which I don't know, nearly as much about as the Pokemon world and some of these non-sports TCGs. But, what I've talked a lot about on the channel, and what I've experienced this year has been what I would call a lot of growing pains with all of the new money and interest, and I think that when markets really take off in a huge way, and you have lots of people who are millionaires now, and people from all sorts of walks of life and experiences who are suddenly millionaires, and you have a lot of people see those people become millionaires, it creates a lot of feelings and all sorts of feelings, and some feelings that I think are healthy and positive, and some feelings that I think lead to greed, taking advantage, of systems, of people, of unregulated markets, jealousy, anger, resentment, questioning people's motives. And in my view, that's all normal. And I don't even think of it as like that unhealthy. I think it's sort of a process that needs to kind of happen. And where I think that and this is also how I invest, Erik, is that for me, when I talk about fundamentals of an item, it comes back to, do people really enjoy this item? And in what way, and do they really enjoy this hobby? Or are people here to get rich, or purely, a high percentage to get rich? And I think that there's nothing, I think that the anger towards people who have that sort of instinct is really unfair, because I think it's a human instinct that sort of instinct of like, I really want to make a lot of money, and they might want to make a lot of money for a lot of good reasons. But I think it does create a lot of tension and a lot of people taking advantage of that in various ways. So I'd love to hear your take on, and then we have a super chat and I'll read it out after, but I'd love to hear, do you feel like some of that stuff has happened in sports? Do you feel like it's happened more to a lesser extent? Sports is a little bit of a different demographic and age range. What's your take on all of it?
Oh yeah, there's definitely no shortage of emotions involved in the sports industry, right?
Yeah.
And it boils down to, on its subconscious psychological level, from my perspective, it boils down to people wanting to hold on to purity about their it's where the hobby meets the industry, road meets the rubber, if you will, where those that are passionate, and most people are to a certain degree internally passionate about it being a hobby, but they also know there's an investment perspective, right? But that the rubber meets the road somewhere where there's that purist meets the investor, right? It meets somewhere. And sometimes it looks great, but it meets somewhere. And people are always trying to protect. And when they're trying to protect their hobby, what they're really trying to do is protect a pure passion in their heart. And that's really what they're saying when they feel like, hey, maybe you're taking advantage of somebody, because they don't want that manipulative greed seeds to be planted in something that they deem pure, and it's such a dichotomy for so much. And, so it's almost like gambling in baseball, right? They look at that, is it like, yes, you shouldn't gamble. You shouldn't gamble on your own team, right? But if you're making bets against other teams playing, whatever, I don't know if I really care one way or the other, but I understand the psychological concept of trying to maintain purity within something that you love. And that's really what's being said, right? That's truly the message that's being conveyed. And you're right. It's human nature for people to want to maximize their ROI investment. It's absolutely, people want to get the absolute most. I'm probably not the best person to ask on that, because of the fact I look at it from the other end of the spectrum. I almost never maximize my ROI, nor do I probably haven't looked at it that way in well over a decade, if ever. I mean, I look back maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Man, I bet there's probably less than 5 cards in my whole career I sold at their peak out of 15 years. I'm the type of person, I never want to sell it at its peak, ever. And I know most people look at me like a moron, but think about this. If I sold 10 cards last year, hypothetically, just arbitrary, throwing out numbers. I mean, I sold a lot more than that, right? So let's say I sold 10 cards and I sold them at their peak every time. That means 10 people just got hosed. That means 10 people just lost money. Because if I sold it at the peak, well, that means it went down after I sold it. And that means literally every person I transacted with lost money. And I'm always dissecting my behavior patterns to the best of my ability. That's not what I want, because I'm dealing with somebody's husband, somebody's wife, somebody's father, somebody's mother. That's
Erik,
real to me.
So therapeutic for me to hear you say these things, because these are the things that I struggle with and I feel so uncomfortable with. And these struggles on how to manage that and where that line is for me personally. And so, for example, like at the height of the Logan Paul, I was selling a bunch of things that I thought were going to go down a lot. And I felt very guilty. Like I was having sleepless nights, like legit sleepless nights about it. And I made this YouTube channel trying to like warn people not to buy these things that I was, selling basically as a way to kind of cope, with some of those feelings. And it's
how I deal with that.
Really, and then there's always the question, right? I mean, there's always the like, well, maybe it'll keep going up. And so that's fair too. Right. And I did say that to myself that, maybe it was going to go up even more. And I wasn't selling really at the peak or these types of things. But what I love and the message that I hear in that, and this is really where I want to come from, is I want to buy and sell things that I think are good things. That the person who I'm selling to is going to enjoy this and get value from it, whether it's because they really want it or because there are there are things about it that are really good, fundamental investments. I don't want to feel like I'm dumping bad product or bad things on people. And part of that too is because I want to be a part of a strong hobby and community. Yes. And every time you do something like that, like every time everyone does something like that or tries to get one over on someone else or mistreats them or is rude to them or says something toxic or does something toxic, you are literally like in small ways creating some of those negative experiences within the hobby, which devalues the hobby and devalues the enjoy, because so much of this hobby is about that enjoyment. And to your point about like, I mean, something with Pokemon and also with sports cards, these are things we collected when we were kids. And so the purity and innocence that you're talking about there, that you have as a kid collecting these types of things and then having people kind of manipulate you around that or be greedy around that. I totally understand, psychologically how that can really hit that. Like it can make people really upset. And I think that there is also a devalidating of those types of people in the hobby right now by certain people who say like, you just need to adapt and it's all about the money and, that type of vibe fighting. Like this isn't just about that. Like there's a lot more going on. So I'm really glad you're bringing up all these themes. And I think that it's a great discussion.
And this is deeper on my personal level. So I don't know how much you know about my past. So there was a time in my life that earlier on in my life, my late teens, early 20s, I'm 43 now. I spent some time behind bars. Didn't grow up in the best environment. I grew up in somewhat of an inner city. My mom to this day doesn't make $16 an hour, so I did not grow up with, my dad's been a construction worker since he's 15. He's 66. He's worn a hard hat his whole life. Basically. And I got into things I probably shouldn't have. And I spent some time behind bars. Next thing you know, in my mid-20s, I ended up homeless, living under a bridge for about 18 months, like literally eating off the streets and begging for money. That taught me a lot about myself and humanity. And I realized, thankfully, I got my stuff together. And I had an addiction problem to narcotics when I was younger. Got sober. I've been sober about 14 and a half years since I got into this. So those coincide together. So my behavior patterns are pretty hand in hand on that aspect. But I learned a lot about myself and humanity. And when I got clean, I joined the military, did some time in the military, get out, and the investments have done great. So I have lived under a bridge. And up until 3 months ago, I spent the past 4.5 years living on the beach in Hawaii. So I've had both ends of that pendulum that we call life. And I realized that if you could make millions in this hobby, let's say you made 3 million in this hobby, and you could end up, or 5 or 7 million in the hobby, and you could end up living on the beach in Hawaii, making an extra 3 million isn't going to change your life. It's not. What can you do with 5 million? What can you do with 7 million? You could do with 5. Like, I had to ask myself years ago, am I just going to spend my whole life chasing money? Mm-hmm. Or can you actually chase humanity and make money? Why not? And I embarked upon that endeavor. I wouldn't change it for the world, man. Like I wouldn't go back and redo almost any of it. I mean, because like, so if I feel like a card might have potential going down, and this stuff, my behavior patterns are why I'm successful, but they're also crazy. I would say well over 70% of the cards I've sold, I offer people like 30-day or 90-day money back guarantees. Look, in 30 days, if you think this card was a bad decision, just call me back. I'll buy it back, period. Like, I mean, but I believe I buy and sell cards that I believe in, like not just for me, but my exit strategy for the person. So like, I'm refined. It's a skill. Like it's a skill. Like I'm good at it and I'm passionate about it. I've done that for a multitude of cards. And when people see that and they're like, what? Like there's who on a personal level, we're at a card show. I'm like, hey man, if next week you think you didn't get a good deal for whatever reason, you're not happy with it, call me. I'll give you all your money back. As soon as I get the card back, refund. Cool. I know that card's going in the direction I think it's going to. Either that or I'll buy cards again, because it's a skill, right? So I'm not trying to flip and maximize. Half the skill is scouting and buying cards today at maybe 5-10% undervalued, or even full market, that you feel like you're going to go up in the next 6, 12, 18 months. There was a card that I sold last week to a gentleman. I bought it 2 years ago for 14 grand, and he had offered me 50, and I didn't need the money at the time, told him no. But he's reached out to me like every month or two for over a year about this card. He wants it. So I needed the money for a big purchase last week and said, hey, his name's Kirk. I was leaving it at that. His first name's Kirk. Hey, Kirk, man. And he wanted mine because it's a Pop 1 PSA 10. I wouldn't sell it. So he went out and bought a PSA 9, the same card. I said, yeah, I realized you bought a PSA 9 because I kept telling you no, but I need to move the card now for a bigger purchase. He's like, man, but I just bought that PSA 9. I get it. And I understand you've offered me 50. So I know you're probably going to have to move that PSA 9, right? At some point. So here's what I'm going to do. You offered me 50. I told you no, I'm going to sell it to you at 45, right? It's probably worth 60. We know that, but it's going to a good home. He's been bugging me for over a year about it. He's a passionate collector. I made my money. I could have squeezed somebody else for 55 or 60, but it's going to a good home. I understand that he probably needs to move he's already paid me, but he's going to need to then move the PSA 9 because he doesn't need both. And he might need to move that one at a little loss just to recoup some of his money fast. So I sold it to him below. Remember, his offer like 3 or 4 months ago was 50. He would have paid that now, but I got to understand that he might lose a little money on another card that he bought because I wasn't selling this one before. And like it just came across him totally right. He was so elated, that he now could take the card he bought and sell it for a little bit of loss and still break even because he had offered me 50, but now I'm giving it to him for 45, Yeah. And it's things like that. But I also got to remember, I could have got 55 for it from somebody else. Dude, I paid 14. 45 is a home run. Yeah, I sat on it for almost 2 years, but man, life is what it is. You can't. And I hear a lot of people buy things. It goes up 20 or 30% or 40%, and they think it will go up a little bit more. Dude, I look at things from like a higher level perspective. That's like your dad or a father giving his 16-year-old a BMW and him throwing him the keys back. Go, I wanted a Mercedes. Like you literally just handed like 20 or 30 or 40% profit on an item. That you probably deep down would be doing this hobby for free if you could be guaranteed to never lose a dollar. You'd probably do it all for free. And people are handed 30, 40% and they want more. Man, it's just probably not the best way to live life. But I mean, I'm just one person. All right, I'm just one person.
Yeah. I mean, it's tricky. I think that I definitely really like the goals underlying this. So I did my thesis in college on altruism and actually game theory behind altruism as well. So I was a philosophy, psychology, and economics, and yeah, the paper drew on biology, neuroscience, philosophy type of paper. And psychology, something called moral psychology, basically the field of moral psychology is kind of like it's a social psychology with some hard sciences. And the thesis of all of this, and this is something that's pretty well known and tested in game theory, which is that, well, if we look at it from a pragmatic perspective, if you have a group of altruists where it's people who are looking out for each other and being kind of open with their intentions and care both about their themselves, it's not about giving, so there are different definitions of altruism. There's a psychological definition of altruism, which is more about this. There's a more biological definition, which has actually to do more with completely lowering yourself for someone else. But this type of altruism where you care, it's a motivational altruism where you care both about yourself, but also about the person that you're dealing with, and really equally as someone who is as important as you, and a human being who, and life that is as important as you. And actually, studies show that when you have a group of altruists, they perform much, much better cooperatively than a group of all cheaters, as they call them or term them. Cheaters who are looking out only for themselves and are trying to basically nickel and dime each other on economic deals. And so what happens is groups of altruists, and I wonder if you've experienced this in your life, that you find that it comes back to you. And when you're an altruist, people do see that over time, and they see those things that you do, and then they give back to you, or they don't nickel and dime you, or you start to build a network of people where you help each other out, and where you spend a lot of energy, not just seeking for your own competitive advantage, but also for the competitive advantage, we could say, or for just the advantage of other people around you. And so I think that, so there's all of that. And then what world do you want to live in? Do you want to live in a world where you need to look out for yourself all the time because everyone around you, you're questioning the motives of everyone around you, and they're all out to get you, and you're the only one who has your back? And it's a trauma, and there's a lot of trauma in the world, and we all have our traumas, right? Which leads to that sort of mindset, which is, and people who have that sort of mindset, it's not there isn't anything like amoral or not moral about a person with that mindset. Generally, it's a person who's been hurt a lot and very understandably doesn't trust people, right? And they have a lot of evidence why they shouldn't trust people. And you know what? Right. And so, but I think that it's one of these things of is it worth it to work towards that, to build those types of friendships and relationships, to build that trust, integrity, loyalty over time with people who you really trust, and trying to build communities like that, building friendships like that, and building business partners like that, and all sorts of things too. And, and I think the answer is yes, but I think that it's not very black and white. It's tricky. And I, as I say often, am no saint. And I struggle with these types of things too. And how much do I need to sort of protect myself and look out for my own best interests versus being charitable and generous. And I think that for everyone, that's a constant struggle, and you can drive yourself crazy with it.
Let's say you bought something, you were ahead of the curve, you got something at a good deal. Like you were saying, you were selling stuff you thought was going to go down. Well, then don't sell it at full market. If it's selling for, let's go $1,000, if the market's 1,000, you bought it for 600, sell it for 9. And if it drops to 6, hey, look, when I gave it to you under market. I do that a ton. I sell stuff, get 5-10% of the market because I've had foresight. So I bought it half off, right? So I went up 30-40%. And if it goes down, there was a card I sold to a guy at 30K, and literally the last comp was a day and a half before, it was 33.5. So, and it was one of the top copies of that. It was PSA 9. I won't get into the card. It's PSA 9. And I told him, and a very iconic card, sports card, very uber iconic. I said, man, I've been doing this a long time. This is probably the best PSA 9 I've ever seen. And I sold it to 10% of the market at 30K, right? I paid 27.5. Like I made $2,500, but I had it for like 3 weeks. That card went up to 84 grand. I saw him at another card show about a month or two later. He's like, Eric, one of these just sold for 84. I looked at him in the face. I was like, bro, you need to sell that card right now for 75 grand. And without missing a beat, his response to me was, I think it'll hit 100. I knew right then I knew how that was going to play out in the future. And it dropped back down to 30 grand, 35 grand, but I told him, I was like, man, I sold it to you 10 under market at 30. And that card in an average copy shot up to 84. What are you waiting on? Is there enough? Is there ever going to be a point where you're like, to where you think to yourself, yeah, this is enough, like really enough, like enough per item or enough per in life? Or you just chasing the number game and everybody else is just collateral damage in your way, potentially, is it, because had he moved it at 7, and I think he wound up selling it later in the 40s, I'm not sure. Let's say it hit 84 and you walked around the show and you sold somebody, hey man, 75. They offered you 72 or 73. Cool. Everybody knew the collective, it could keep going up, but if you sell it 10, 15% under market, remember you got into it for 30. I mean, geez, like, let's be real here. Let's be real here. And if you sell it for 10, 15 under market and it plummets, look, I mean, you could have turned it and flipped it that day. I sold it to you for 10 or 15 under market. What you choose to do with it is what you choose to do with it. But if it did go to 100, now you're into cheap. You paid 72, 73. Now you're, so you cover both ends because it's hard for somebody to be mad at you if you sell something 5 or 10% of the market and then it comes down because, you were trying to do them a solid and it just didn't work out for either one of you. Right. And I do that with almost every single transaction, like literally. That's how I got my job at PWCC. Actually, I wasn't even auctioning things. I was selling them cards at private deals. They would call me, Erik, what Kobe and LeBrons do you got? What Jordans you got? I'd show them and we'd agree on market value. I knew what their margin was. I brought my price down. So if I had like 400K in cards, 500K, this is what we agree.
I think we may have lost Erik. Erik, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hello?
Can you guys hear Erik, or did we lose him?
You there?
Oh, there. Now you're back. Lost you for a second.
Where was I at? You lost me. PWCC. Did you hear me talk about PWCC?
Yeah. Yes, you started talking about PWCC and how you got your job there through.
Yeah. So I was selling them cards so we'd agree like this 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 cards.
Yeah.
Agree market value is $500,000. Then I would just say, all right, we agree this is market. I would bring my price down so that way they could get their margin on it. I need full market. You need to figure out the rest. No. All right. Full market's 500. All right, let's do 450. You make 10% or whatever they needed to make. And the buyer got market price. And in essence, I would eat, or we would split the fees, because I felt like that was fair, and I did that repeatedly. And one thing that always came up is like, Erik, we love doing business with you. You're easy to deal with. You're fair in your prices. You're just moving stuff, and that is important. But that behavior pattern led to me now being an employee there. Like that behavior pattern over time has worked out best. But I think it's important. What you were saying is a group of people looking out for each other's best interest works in the totality of things better than those that don't. One part, I think that one of the greatest parts that I have gained in this entire hobby is growing as a man. Like as a man, I soon realized, and this was paramount in my life as a human. Because I hear a lot of people have a caveat, pivot to that discussion as well. This person's not like that, or this person's not like that. There's a lot of people that aren't like that. So they're justifying being on the fence or not being that person because of others' behaviors. I do not base my behavior and my morality and my decision-making on any other human at all. If you scam me, if you ostracize me, if you treat me unfairly, if you, whatever, however you treat me, and this is important about me being a man, should not, and I work to grow on this every day, should not affect how I treat you or others, because my morals are not malleable. They're not based on your behavior to me. My morals are based on my core system of values and my beliefs. And once I found that out, I realized what it meant to be a man.
I think it's that tricky line of like taking in constructive criticism or helpful other ideas that are different from you versus taking things in that you really disagree with on a strong personal moral level, but taking them in only because you need to be liked by everyone, or you can't confront ways of thinking that you really disagree with or that feel, very wrong with you. And I think that's a difficult line. I mean, it's something that I really struggle with, and being a social media person or being on YouTube where I get, people say these critical comments, I can put it that way. One I got recently was something like, which stuck with me for a while, was, that I condescend to people, and that that my sort of like my way of talking about altruism sometimes, or morality, is condescending and gatekeeping in and of itself to some degree. And I get the core of the argument, which is like, when you talk about these things, it can make people feel like you're telling them how to live. And if they don't believe what you believe, it can feel like gatekeeping and condescending. Right. It's like, if this is what I think it means to be a man, right. In the way that you put it, right. It's like, if someone else like has a drastically different view of life, they're going to be like, that's not what being a man is. I'm a man, and this is what being a man, you know what I mean? And so I think that that there's also just like, we share the planet, and like people
Yeah.
are gonna have different things. But I do think like you can drive yourself crazy with trying to please everyone and trying to, explain yourself to that person. Although, I mean, ideally it would be nice, right? If people who disagree could treat each other with respect and work hard to see the other person's perspective on life and not challenge their motives, which is a lot of what's happening, both when we talk politically, the politically charged nature of the country. And there's a lot of jumping to challenging motives rather than listening to like why someone has the beliefs that they have and why that's important to them. But it's been a really interesting process. And, it's something that I put a lot of thought into, and I'm working on myself, Erik, is just how to cope with that or deal with or take those comments in, and how to engage with them in a way that is not destructive for me, but also can be a growing experience possibly. And I can learn things from them and grow from them, and understand where other people are coming from. That's certainly a huge part of my personality, is I'm always trying to learn. So when someone has a surprising reaction, like when someone has a very negative reaction and I'm like, whoa, like, trying to understand. But, there's also a certain amount of people on the internet who anyone who maybe is emotional or vulnerable or shares things that are personal to them or that they really believe, they're going to attack that person because they see an opportunity to maybe wound someone or hurt someone or these types of things. And
the weird part is
what it is.
Yeah. I mean, the weird part is for me, like, I'm pretty conservative in my political beliefs. I'm true capitalism, but I understand that there are negative aspects of both, right? So it's a realist. You got to be real with whatever your belief system is, that there's pros and cons to it, no matter what side of the spectrum you are. And like you were saying, it's important. There's two things that make humans important. One of them is you literally should be able to handle your emotions and have the right and the ability to agree to disagree and shake hands. That's why you can drink.
The good thing to work on.
Dude, that's why you're allowed to drink alcohol, because you're supposed to be able to handle your emotions, right? If we're at a state in humanity where we can't handle our emotions, we need to outlaw everything and go back to the drawing board and figure out what's wrong. And why can't we play nice with each other? You should be able to say, hey, look, I absolutely don't agree, but man, I respect you. And if you want to go have a drink, we can. Or if you just want to go hang out, you should be able to be friends with people on the left, people on the right. You should be able to have drastic differences, but still be friends with each other. I mean, it's okay to have different perspectives in how you handle the business in this industry, or okay, so you're a Pokemon guy, right? And I'm a sports guy. We should be able to totally coexist and encourage each other. I should not be, forget that stuff. That's not real collecting. I don't tolerate, not say I don't tolerate. I always advocate against my sports card collectors when they, now we all joke with each other, right? Because, Pokemon guys joke with us and we go back and forth. But I think it's important that every alternative card asset encourages each other's growth, right? I'm huge into that. Like I'm passionate about that. Not only should we encourage, it wouldn't hurt to learn something about it. And so I think it's important that, and it's the same thing. You see people that are comics, dog, other collectors, or coins, especially coins, because they were here first, really. And let's be honest, coin collecting was here first. So I think it's important that we learn how to encourage each other, even if we don't agree or even have similar interests.
Yeah, I mean, you and I definitely see total alignment on that, which makes a conversation like this easy. I think not everyone sees things the way that we might, in this way, even if the majority might, and do and probably do, and so I think that it's the difficult part is when someone disagrees with that premise, right? When someone comes at you for even having an opinion, or it comes at, like your opinion is so offensive to them that they have to wipe your opinion off the face of the earth, and then how you, and defend yourself. And that's what it feels like, right? At times, like, it's like your opinion is so deeply offensive to me, and then there's egos involved and people wanting to be smart or right or a debate, and there's also like people trying to grow followings and have people view them as smart and right because they're trying to build a business, and people are young, and I don't mean that as an insult, but young in terms of they're not where you are in terms of having the millions and having a career and being well established and respected. And so they feel they need to do that sort of competitiveness and that fighting and that grinding and that, and they may not, right? And I think part of what we're talking about is ideally you don't have to, and you find other people. There are other ways that you can go about it, and ways that you might find you're actually a lot more successful if you go about it that way. Then it can line up. But yeah, it's a great discussion. Anything you, just to sum it up maybe, and then maybe we'll jump back to some PWCC questions and maybe if people want to start asking questions. Share with me sort of any sort of summarizing thoughts. Love to give you the floor, Erik. Thank you so much for having this discussion with me.
I heard Dr. James Beckett say something a few weeks ago that when I heard it stopped me in my tracks, completely stopped me. He's so profound. I love Dr. Beckett. He was the architect, the creator of Beckett Grading, right? Then he sold it several years back. God, I wish he still had it, man. I'm a huge Beckett fan. Man, I really wish he still had Beckett. Anyway, I heard him say something that just was so profound, stopped me in my tracks. Is that the people who are new to the industry, especially the younger people, they have figured out a way to expedite or shorten the learning curve in this industry, almost exponentially. They have basically shortened the learning curve of knowledge in this industry. They have figured out the social media, data research. They have shortened what it used to take somebody 5, 6, 7 years to learn and how to navigate. They've shortened it down to like 6, 8, 9 months. They have shortened the learning curve for knowledge, but you cannot shorten the learning curve for wisdom. That was intense when I heard that. That's true. That's true in so many facets of life, because there's so much where people have FOMO. They see certain cards go up, then they crash. They don't understand this and that. They have shortened the learning curve for knowledge. You cannot shorten the learning curve for wisdom. There are some things in life that it just takes time, and that's it.
So my day job, I'm a psychotherapist. So I do and work with individuals. So I spend a lot of time thinking about, what is health, what is mental health, and I think it's tied a lot to a word like wisdom and what a word like wisdom means to some extent, or people having, a sense of how to live for themselves and how to relationship that they have with themselves or the decisions that they make, and having a lot of things line up. So it's something that is a question that I spend a lot of time thinking about, and have spent the last 8, 9 years of my life, working with people to try and answer both for myself and help other people answer, for them. Part of the reason that people definitely, a lot of people become therapists too, is because they're very interested, in that question, both for themselves and then sharing that, and really, really wanting to help others, like having that fiery passion of like, what does that really mean? And what does that sort of health look like? And, thank you for having a discussion. It's something that I think is really important in this community. And it's also something I spend a lot of time thinking about, in my other job. So we have a couple of super chats here, by Alan the Kraken. I'll just quickly read them. He says, I love cardboard rectangles. It's very difficult to learn to detach your feelings from reality. Trade and history evolved by using money. Says, I think it's important not to discredit the consumer. Maybe they know something you don't. It's impossible to time markets. Going off of that conversation we had about how much can we really time markets, and I think that it's these markets have a lot. There's a lot easier pattern recognition, particularly for people who are experienced in markets like this, I think, than something like the stock market, is what I would say. But I think exactly timing markets and all that type of stuff is something that, maybe someone who's very experienced can do it a little bit of a higher clip, but not necessarily extremely accurately. Yeah. But I do think the point behind all of that, even if you can't correctly time the market, it's about your motivation, right? It's about, are you trying to dump cards on someone, or do you think you're selling good things to them, right? And we kind of had that discussion earlier, which I think was a good discussion. And he says, support products, creators, artists, or just people you believe in. People grow and learn, especially when they make mistakes. Yeah. And then he says, financial literacy is a crisis in the United States. we need classes in high school. Yeah. So, yeah. So thank you for those super chats and sharing those comments. I think that that's another area that I'm passionate in, and I've worked a lot in schools, so we can have a whole discussion about what's the appropriate classes to teach in schools, and how to give a well-rounded education is a great maybe discussion for a different day that you and I might both have opinions on, but we could really get into the weeds.
So timing of a market. So I'm not familiar with if there's ability to time non-sports markets, but you can definitely time sports industry markets, at least to a certain degree. So you never want to buy during the first 20% of a season. You traditionally don't want to buy then. And that's not always the case, but it's a good rule of thumb. The best time to buy is when your team, a week after your team gets bumped, if they get bumped from the playoffs. So this is sports, right? So in any sport, if your team just got eliminated from the playoffs, in the next 2 to 3 weeks, you need to start buying that team if you're going to invest in them for next season, because that's when they start to fall off the cliff. Even if it's a good player, it doesn't matter who it is. Mahomes, baseball, football, it doesn't, basketball, doesn't matter. The best time to buy Luka Doncic is a week, 2 to 3 weeks after he's eliminated from the playoffs, because his cards start to go off as the playoffs continue. People start going into the people who are going in the playoffs and people that got knocked out. That's when you want to buy that, for 2 to 5 weeks after that is a good window. And then you sell leading up to, so right before the season starts the next season, right? Up into the first 20% of the season. So you have football coming up now. Tom Brady stuff's going through the roof. We're hitting preseason. It's starting to be, very talked about, whatnot. And then now Tom Brady's different. I probably wouldn't sell his high-end stuff. I just keep it for years. But other players, I would definitely want to hold on to. I would want to sell them before, week 5 to week 6 at the latest, probably week 4 to 5.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar in the Pokemon card market in terms of there are going to be your, first appearance type cards of certain cards or high-end trophy cards that, although there might be some sort of cyclical pattern with them, because they're so difficult to acquire, you may want to just hold them through that cyclical pattern, like one of these, like a high-end Tom Brady card, etc. I think with Modern and Pokemon, similarly, historically, it's been very erratic this year. There's been a lot of just erratic, crazy movements. And so this year in particular, because it's not normal, and this year hasn't been normal, it's been a lot harder to time things this year, I would say, and a lot more unclear because there's been so much new interest. Like the demand is so much higher that the usual timing patterns that we might work off of, it's like, well, you buy the new Modern set, after it's nearly out of print, right? Or it's not, you don't want to buy it right when it comes out, or a few months after it probably comes out normally, because that's when it's at its highest, because people are paying the highest prices for the playability, et cetera. There's a lot of things that have been true for a long time. So, but it's, okay. So guys, if anyone has questions, just to shift the discussion, and we can definitely come back to these things too. And I definitely I think we should have we can definitely talk more broadly about the market. And let me know, Erik, if you need to go. I know you've had a really long work day and all that sort of thing. So you'll just let me know.
About 10 or 15 minutes, if you don't mind.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll do about 10 or 15 more minutes. So let's spend that time then talking about PWCC. So I guess if anyone has a question, I will ask the first question. So what can you share with us about the PWCC eBay situation? Whether it's kind of sharing your opinions, what do you feel comfortable sharing?
Well, I know for my opinions, and I mentioned this before the broadcast, working there, we signed. Here's the thing. So the eBay email said that there was associates at PWCC that were still bidding. To the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been any evidence provided who these associates were. Right. So there was no direct allegations to employees, past or present. There was very vague, very, very vague. That being said, I know for a fact, as an employee, we have to sign a contract saying that as employees, we will not bid on items. Not only we're not allowed to bid, even if we want them. Like I'm a collector. Like I collect vintage baseball. and basketball, some football. That's it, right? Even if there's a card that I want, I'm not allowed to bid on it. Even if it's a true purchase intent, one that I want to either buy for short-term or long-term hold, I can't bid on an item. Not just me, PWCC employees can't bid on an item. We can't submit a best offer on something listed on the marketplace or hit buy it now. We are not allowed to purchase from the PWCC platform. And that was a practice that was standing before that email came out. Right. So that's been a how can you say, the perception of how we look as a company has been something that's been going on the entirety of my employment there. Mm-hmm. So, I can say that for sure. I didn't, and as a collector, trust me, I didn't want to sign that document saying, because I bought from PWCC. I buy a lot from them. I had to pick going to work there versus, hey, I spent a lot, hundreds of thousands of dollars from them, right? Like, why do I want to do this? But I understood their goal and perception of why they had that document that people had signed, because it makes sense. They chose to pursue the perception of what's best for the industry and hobby and the company versus wanting my money as an individual, which I think is huge. That says a lot. So it really struck hard. It hurt when I read that email from eBay, because I know as a fact for me that we don't bid on items, so, and if it's associates that we don't know, or people that can sign with us or buy from us, or one of the 100, 200, 300,000 people that use eBay for cards, or 500,000, however many it is, we can block as many people as we can, but we can't make it a perfect industry. We can do it. It's not like we don't block people. We've been maxed out, because you can max up to 5,000 people on eBay. If you're an account, if you have a marketplace account there, right, you can block up to 5,000 people. We've been maxed out, right? We block a ton of people. So I know that.
So what do you think? What do you think happened here? Why do you think eBay did this?
I wish we knew. I wish there was more to it. I wish there was more information given.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I wish that there was more of an explanation. I do. I really do. I wish there was more of a given to us and the marketplace. Because let's be honest, we're just one entity. It affected a whole market, right? So I feel like to a certain degree, the market kind of deserves more info as well. Not just so much PWCC, and with the removal of us, and I mentioned this to you before, so we had a thing called Auction Archive. We track the sales data of every item sold on eBay by PWCC. We still offer that. That's still going to be offered. That's still actually, I think, on our website. We still offer the entirety of the archive history database of anything we've sold. But we also used to offer the eBay marketplace tool, which allowed people to go to our website and explore the history, I think over the past 10 plus years, of any item sold on eBay, any card, right? Any card sold on eBay over the past decade. Because we're no longer affiliated, we don't have the rights to that data, or the rights to the access to that data. And it just got removed. So they could, even though they want to sever ties with us, I get it. Totally understand. We can agree to disagree, shake hands, part ways. I understand that, totally respect that. There's no reason eBay couldn't put that data as a research tool on their platform. Forget about PWCC. The market really needs that data, research data, the marketplace. And eBay should make it readily available for whether it be Card Snoop, 130 Point, Card Ladder, any auction archive data, business, or whether they charge for it or they give it for free, that data is paramount for the health and growth of our hobby/industry. I firmly believe that regardless of their perspective on us, they shouldn't be hindering the users and the consumers.
Yeah. One thing that I found frustrating that PWCC did, and this might be something that you just don't have insight into exactly why they did it, but I'll ask you anyway, Erik, because I'd be interested, and it's on this topic of show bidding, is they made bids private. And I didn't like that because I am someone who actually, I like to track who's buying things. And I like to track the way people bid to see if I feel like this item that I'm bidding on has been shill bid, or someone who is constantly bidding on many items is, and then retracts them later, I even track, like, does this person actually pay for the items? Because you can see the items then come back on. And now I can't do any of that. So it makes me have that suspicious thought of like, well, that makes it a lot easier for like friends or employees at PWCC to manipulate their own market if they were to do something like that. So if you look at the timing of that with this eBay thing, and then I heard that they did that for anonymity, to try to, for privacy for people. And I understand that, but do you have any insight into what those discussions were, why they did that? Yeah, please. I'd love to hear it.
So yeah, remember when that happened, I wasn't an employee, right? So I looked at it from your perspective, right? My perspective was not from an employee. My perspective was from a consumer.
You understand how I feel.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I didn't like it either. I absolutely didn't like it either. And I'm not sure to this day I still like it, because had we not done that, that wouldn't be a discussion topic, right? We wouldn't be discussing it now, right? So I can't even say in hindsight that I totally agree with it as a consumer and a collector. However, I do also understand. So I allow myself to digest and accept how I feel about it personally, but I also try to look at things from like the devil's advocate, if you will, or the other person's perspective wholly. And it took about a half year for me to open up my heart to be willing to listen to the other end, because I was like, nope, don't want to hear it. Nope, don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear your side. But once I started working there, I understood the perspective as a collector and consumer, plus as an employee. I'm not gonna lie, because I kept spreadsheets, I kept data, I kept a lot of stuff, and tracked bids and bid histories and behavior patterns of buyers, right? To help me better my craft of knowing when and what to bid on, and what items were heading in what direction, and truly how many different people were bidding on an item. And in all honesty, if I'm completely honest with you myself, I was using that information to give me an unfair advantage above other people who might not have done that. I
don't think that's an unfair advantage, but that might be you and I disagreeing. I think that's us really doing the work. But
an unfair advantage in regards to, I would cross-reference that data to other auction houses and other platforms, right? So only PWCC offered that, right? So I was using that information and data to see whether or not, because if you remove that ability, because remember, it was only PWCC that offered that, right? You don't see who bids on Golden, on Heritage, Maha, Memory Lane, SCP, Probstein, or really anybody else. So, now maybe smaller auction houses on eBay still do it. Most don't. Most have
Probstein you can see.
Oh, Probstein you still can see?
I believe so. Yeah. So maybe there are some high-end items. They might have some items they block out, but I think the majority of their items that you can see.
Okay. All right. So, and I think to a certain degree, I can understand why. But the reason what I was told is because a lot of the anonymity of people who came into the market with a ton of money, they didn't want people seeing what they're bidding on left and right. Because remember, they came in kicking the door open, right? You come into the market with 7 figures of liquidity. You don't want people seeing your behavior patterns and buying, and you don't want to open 3, 4, 5 eBay accounts, multiple vault accounts, or they want to be able to do what, to buy and sell things at whatever level that they want without being tracked. And I can kind of understand that. And then you also have to understand how many people came in this industry with deep pockets that wanted that. A ton. I mean, a ton of people came in this industry with 6, 7 figures of liquidity, wanting to just buy in bulk or buy whatever. But I get both.
Do you have any insight? Do you have any insight on, was it like a big company that complained and didn't want themselves to be tracked, like one of these,
Oh, it wasn't one person. I'm not gonna lie. It was a multitude.
It was a lot of people and a lot of
And the truth is,
are you like privy to all that information? Like, and were you part of those?
Okay. Yeah, a lot of it. I can't go into detail. Like, I can't give specifics, but yeah, it was a multitude of people. But the truth is, and here's the one thing, right? And I know this for a fact. And you can see if you followed card porn. So card porn, every couple times a week, they show all the, like, an excuse page, people backing out of not wanting to buy things, or or
Sure.
whatever. Do you follow that? Do you see how they post stuff, people like not want to pay for stuff?
I don't actually, but I believe it.
Right. So most people that don't pay for things, we were tracking that most people that don't pay for things, unpaid items, were people with higher feedback than lower feedback, people above 100 feedback than lower. So a lot of people that were getting into the industry, they were easily traceable because they might have set their eBay account up over the past year. So they had 12 feedback, 13 feedback. You were able to see them from their infancy grow. And I can't get into names, but prominent people who are known, 8-figure, 7-8 figure
Yeah.
net worth. They were creating these accounts. You were able to see them grow from an early age. It wasn't like they came into the scene with 700 feedback and you don't know what they're buying. You could pretty much track what they're bidding on because they would only exclusively buy through one or two companies on all of eBay, right? So, and I understood that perspective, but yeah, most people that were unpaid and that were, I would say it's probably 60-40 shill bid items and people that were buying things. I call them shill bid, people that bought things that didn't pay. They're usually people that had higher feedback. But if there's items that are getting hyper inflated, you can see that with or without the feedback rating, But yeah, I understand. I mean, had they not done that, we wouldn't be having this discussion today. So it did come. If you fast forward to today, in hindsight, from my perspective, I wish they would have left it alone, but I'm not. I don't make the decision.
I think it's one of these things where it's like I need proof to be like there's corruption here, or these types of things. But I think similarly, if we look at the hot water that Wada Games is in, right? Part of that too is because they don't have pop reports. They don't put up pop reports. And so there's the fact that you can't, when you don't give data for people to track and look at, it makes these markets it's so much easier to manipulate these markets. And then you just have to trust PWCC. You have to trust Wada. You have to trust all these people instead of giving us the data, and then we can do the work ourselves and really see what's happening here. But I do understand the other side of the argument, and that these auction houses really listen to the people who are actually making these big purchases, because that is their customers, right? The people who are selling the item. And so I get the argument that if they're upset and that, and that maybe we need to privatize bidding for that reason, because if the customers really want it and it is what it is. So I understand that makes some sense to me.
The deciding factor was that came about, right? The deciding factor was, hey, look, we have the auction archive. So the auction archive, all the things that sold on PWCC, everything that was paid for was entered into the archive. All the items that were won and not paid for never were entered in the auction archive. So we kind of came to the deciding factor. Hey, look, we understand people want to know. It's odd to say, hey, I want to know who's bidding on these items. Because if you say that out loud, that's kind of hey, it's kind of private stuff. I think I should have the right to know who's bidding on items. I want that as a buyer, but do I really need that? And from PWCC's perspective, we're like, hey, look, we're the only company that is open and transparent at that time. Because remember, they've had that auction archive for a while now, right? So at that time, when its inception, PWCC took the stance and says, hey, we tell you what was paid for and what wasn't. Nobody else does that. Nobody else comes out and says, hey, we sold 41,000 items last month, 39,200 of them were paid for. These other ones weren't. So if it was entered into the archive, it was a legit sale, a legit it was bought and paid for. Now, who paid for it? Whether dudes, next door neighbors, brothers, cousins. Look, we try to discern and block people if we find that it's same IP address. We're smart. We're not dumb, right? We can block those people. But if it was a legit and bought and paid for item, we put it in the archive. So we added transparency there and said, hey, look, if people are worried about these items getting shilled up and unpaid for, if that happens, they're not entered into our archive. So we're already going to extract that from them.
So a couple people in the chat, the Kingman says that it's ridiculous that people with money would be embarrassed about their spending. So I think it's more that people, I know some celebrities who are, who have tons of money, who they don't want people to know that they're in these communities. They don't want people to know that they're spending a lot of money. And so it's more of a privacy thing around, they don't want to be tracked. They don't want to, there are people who do lots of buyouts. They don't want people to be able to see that they own all of that card, these types of things. So now, I mean, I don't want to be tracked myself, so
it's not that they're embarrassed, and that's not it at all. Because a lot of these people,
I know.
Right. It's not that they're embarrassed. They just don't want people to know if you're buying 8 or 10 Topps Chrome Refractor LeBron James.
Exactly.
It's what they're buying. Well, so here's the thing, right? So let's look at it this way, right? Let's throw a name out hypothetically. And this has no relation, just arbitrary picking a name. People don't like when Gary Vee is public about what he's buying and selling. Most of those same people would love to know what Gary Vee is buying and selling on PWCC. They don't want to see him publicly talk about it, yet they sure want to know what he's doing privately. Well, you can't have it both ways, right? So if Gary Vee or Bill Gates or whoever, Elon Musk, if they're buying from auction houses at whatever magnitude or whatever cards they are, at whatever level they're buying them, it's not that they're embarrassed. They just don't want other people knowing about it. And the truth is, if they were public about it, they'd get shamed by the same people for being public about it. So they can't be private about it and they can't be public about it. Yeah. So, I mean, they kind of, and I get it. Trust me, I've been on both sides. Been on both sides. But if you have $10 million and people are able to discern that you're the one buying things, or because part of that, if you're rich and if you got if you got 7-8 figures in the bank or more, right? You didn't get there being stupid. You don't want everybody seeing what your move is for 2 years down the road. Yeah. And that's the truth. And that conversation's had a lot. Hey, look, I don't want people, because a lot of those people, some of them you could say are pumping numbers. I get it. Totally understand that side. Absolutely. Some of them are playing the long game for 3-5 years down the road. They don't want people knowing what they're buying today for 18 months, 36 months down the road. They want to be able to buy what they want, sit on it for as long as they want, do what they want with it. They don't want people tracking their moves, and I get that. And to be honest, the people complaining, and this is a hard discussion to have. It really is. This is kind of deep, and it might come across wrong. We're protecting the best interest of the high bidder, the people that were buying and paying for stuff. The people that were complaining were probably like the 5th highest, 8th highest bidder, or weren't even bidding on the item. So we have to take into account, whose interest do we protect? The people that the high bidder who pays for the item, or the 7th highest bidder who was, let's say the item was sold for $5,000. You bid 1,700 and you want to see who bids above you. Why? If you're the 2nd highest bidder, I get that. You kind of want to make sure the person who won it was legitimate, right? I understand that. But if you're the 7th or the 11th highest bidder, we kind of need, as a company, to protect, the highest bidder, whether they have a $5,000 portfolio or $20 million portfolio. If you're the highest bidder and you want it, you paid for it, and you want your anonymity protected, it was easier when we were a smaller company and the market was a lot smaller, and Jordan PSA 10s were selling for 27, 29,000. Most cards were hovering between 15K or lower. LeBron James Chrome refractors were 2,500. His chromes were 2,500. Yeah. His refractor were $10,000.
I think for me, and then I have 2 more questions I hope we can get to, and then we'll end for today, because I think there are 2 more important sort of PWCC topics I have to ask you about. But I think for me, just to kind of, I guess, wrap it up and maybe give you my feelings on it, is that I would have liked it if PWCC had said, these guys are going to be bidding on these items anyway. I don't think you saying that making it private is probably going to be the deciding decision of whether or not they actually bid on the items. So I would make that, from that financial argument, I still think these guys would be buying cards and we would just be able to see what they were buying. And I think the other part is that it's fair for everyone, right? So they get to see who are the other big people buying it, which is probably good information for them. So I think that I would have preferred it all to be out there and that people can track it and look at it and that it's public. But I'm someone who, I like the transparency. I like the data. And I think it rewards the people who put in the work. And I think it's good for the hobby from a transparency front. But I definitely understand the argument, and I definitely understand why people wouldn't want others to know. And you know, and particularly, you know, if it's someone like Gary Vee or you know, other people that I know that are buying these types of items, whether it's in the Pokemon world or other world, they don't also want to be seen as like shilling the items. If they buy a high item and now they're being told that they shilled, that they were trying to push that item up, and then you saw them talk about it on a story and push it on their channel, and they don't want to get caught in all of that and make it look like they're manipulating the market through their purchases. So there's a lot of factors in that, and it's complicated.
Oh, absolutely.
But I think we had a good discussion on that, and I think that will hopefully help the audience understand that it's not an easy decision for PWCC to make.
Yeah, and that's the end of the day. So here's the other thing, right? You're right. There was no right. We were in a situation, there was no right answer for us. Like, that's the truth. There was no, hey, this is the diamond in the rough here. This is the perfect answer. Now, could maybe in hindsight, knowing that we're right now, maybe could more emails been put out saying this is what's going to happen, this is why we're doing it? Could it have been handled a little better? Unequivocally, yes. The situations can always be handled better in hindsight. I get that.
Yeah.
From my perspective as an employee, I absolutely agree with what you're saying about, hey, we want more transparency, this and that, whatever. But from an employee now that I work at PWCC, people only want that from us. Why don't people demand that from other auction houses?
Well,
here's the thing.
I want it from everyone.
Yeah, but the discussion only comes up with us, right? And the only reason it comes up is, well, you used to do it. Sure. Yeah, but we were doing it when nobody else, when basically outside of eBay, nobody does it.
Well, that's unfair. That's definitely unfair. So anyone who's you know, focusing in on you and that happens, right? And that's just a problem of changing something. When you change something, it puts it into the public eye and people notice it and talk about it. When something exists and is always a certain way, people accept it, even if it's not good for them. People tend to accept things that are bad for them and it's part of dangerously psychologically why people do really bad things and then they don't talk about it and they don't apologize, they don't come out and they don't say anything about it, because psychologically when you don't make news, people don't then record it in their brains and ask lots of questions about it. It's all very true. That's a great point.
Here's the reality though. The elephant in the room that nobody talks about because it's 2 or 3 layers deep in the discussion topic.
Yeah.
If people or the market wants PWCC to be transparent to a certain degree, at least have the feedback score and maybe 1 or 2 layers. I'm pretty certain. Well, we're not on eBay anymore, right?
Yeah.
Now we're on our own platform. If the market wholeheartedly stood up collectively together and demanded it from every other auction house, I'm pretty sure we'd jump back on board.
Let's do it.
You're right. And that's what I'm saying. Like the market, if the market, they go, well, what about they spend all their time focusing on PWCC, what they changed. Man, if you want that transparency across the board, you should demand it from every auction house that you like. I'm a registered, like I buy stuff from Golden, Heritage, Leland's, SCP, Memory Lane.
We're moving, by the way. Like I think the stuff with WADA and the stuff with Heritage and you know, and some stuff about gold, like with Golden and all these, like I think we're gonna head to more public crying for transparency.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's a good thing. And I think that these companies should not view it as like a bad thing, but it's about actually improving their relationship. And if none of these places have anything to hide, then it should be something that they all should be, you know, on board with these types of things. Now, it can be more complicated. So, you know, and if it is more complicated, it's about explaining why we don't do it. And that we're not market manipulating here. There are very specific reasons. And for me, I would need definitive proof of market manipulation before I would say that any of these auction houses are doing that. But all of this just shows that issue of like, we're unregulated and there's a lot of money in this stuff now. And these companies are making tons of money and they owe, you know, there's a responsibility.
I think the discussion should be had, right? Yeah. I think that's basically where we're at. I think we can agree upon that. Like, I think collectively, now that we're on our own platform and other auction houses all do their own platform, I think it's worth having the discussion. At least maybe it doesn't have to be like a representative from every auction house, but I think it's a discussion that the market should have with the auction houses and figureheads with the industry, right? Like, hey, Like we're concerned. We love the industry. We love the hobby.
100%.
We understand it's bumping on a $10 billion industry, or will be in the next 18 months, right? It's up here. The market, or the market base, individuals or figureheads of the market base, kind of would like a little bit more transparency. I think whether it has to happen or not, I think it's important that the discussion is had, because there's obviously a concern. Like you're saying, you're reading questions. People have what I think the discussion absolutely should happen. If nothing else, it's going to show growth and willingness to come to the table from the representatives of the auction house and representatives of the marketplace. But there's nothing negative. Nothing negative is going to happen with the discussion topic, right? I mean, because I've been a collector for 15 years. I have a multi-million-dollar portfolio myself multiple times over. Like I've only been working at PWCC for a year. I spent 15 years as a collector investor.
Yeah.
I see both sides, and I see one side way more than the other.
Absolutely.
I think the discussion should be made. Absolutely. I think there's no negative from that. Now, if certain auctions houses do it or don't do it, teach on their own. I don't own any of them, right? But I think it's a good discussion topic to have, because what's happening is when it comes up enough, it's important that those auction houses or powers that be at least hear that there's a concern or a voice, right? Whether anything's done, you still need, and it's almost like in a marriage. If your wife's arguing with you, she's not arguing with you because she's bored and has nothing to do. She's arguing with you maybe because she's got something that she's really trying to say, and maybe take some time out of your life and listen to her. You know, if you care about the other side, it's important to have the discussion in life.
Yeah. And these are growing pains. And I literally, going to what I said earlier on in the conversation, like I want, like, people should have confidence that like people will figure these things out. The hobby is not going to die or be wounded irreparably by any of these things. In my personal opinion, it's just a question of figuring these things out over the time and developing that trust. And all of these hobbies, we need trust and transparency, you know, from collectors with our grading card companies, and understand, you know, and it's just vital for it.
Let me ask you a question, right? So let's say you own an auction house. And so I put myself in a situation all the time. Let's say our last premier auction, right?
Yep.
And let's say we did some type of pattern where everybody had some type of feedback score or some type of, you know, notifier, to where you didn't know that this was attached to this person, but you can see the behavior person at bidder X, right? And you've got about a couple hundred items on auction, or a couple thousand, like Golden. Golden's got a lot of items. Good for them, man. I mean, I'm glad they're growing, right? Because it helps the market.
Yeah.
But let's say you really only have about a pool of 200 deep pocket people, or 150 or 100 people that really have deep pockets. And let's say it's only 100 people on every auction house, and they bid kind of within the same auction house. But let's say that's not even go that deep. Is it fair to those 100 people that are bidding and winning most of these items that other people, because let's say like we had 150 items on our last archive, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, is it fair to those people that are winning the big items that you can track them month to month to month and see what they're putting in their personal collection? You know, because I'm gonna be honest, if you can Google call Christie's and Sotheby's, people that bid on 10,000 plus items on those major on Christie's and Sotheby's, there's like less than 3,000 people. They've got like a 250,000 registered bidders, but like 3,500 people bid 10K and up. Those people, and I hear it, trust me, I'm on both sides of this argument. I hear it.
No, I get it, man. It's a privacy thing. It comes down to privacy.
I mean, right. Because what if you bid on the Brady Champ ticket? What if you bid on the other one? What if you won this and won that? People are going to be able to know, hey, it doesn't take long, because you post one card that you bought on Instagram. You post one card, and they can then go, oh, well, this guy who owns this must be this person's bidder ID. So he must also own all this, you know? And then you get flooded with all these questions. I mean, trust me.
I get it.
I'm open about my collection.
I totally get it. And I'm naturally a private person, because I enjoy, like, I'm an introvert. And so I don't want lots of questions about my collection, and I don't want lots of people reaching out to me and saying, can I buy that? Like, I don't show some of my rarest pieces and some of my like lowest pop cards, because I don't want lots of questions, because I know there are a lot of people searching for those, and I don't want to sell them. And I don't want I don't want people to know about it. And so if someone saw me buy that on PWCC, I would, then everyone in the community would know I would have, like, I might have that card and they'd be reaching out, that type of thing. So it has nothing, that's an example for me where it has nothing to do with making money or any sort of financial thing. In terms of me, like doing buyouts and not wanting people to be aware that I'm buying things out, right? Which is also potentially going on in part of this, but it comes from just that pure point of like, I don't want it. Like, I'm collecting for myself, and I don't want this to be like part of my public brand that I own this for whatever reason. And do people have the right, to ask that or have that? And I guess, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think it's whatever all these places decide. And maybe it's also good that some are private, some aren't private, because then maybe you have an option to buy at the private or the not private if it's really that important to you and it matters that much. And then you get into that discussion, you might lose business. So the next question I want to ask you, Erik, just two more, is can you talk to me a little bit about PwC's plans on this new anything you can share, and feel free to just avoid this and not speculate on this if you don't want to. Do you think that PwC's plans for building out this website had anything to do with breaking up with eBay, or that there had been issues with eBay for a while over this, or they saw that losing business? And because that's this thing that's being speculated on. Again, nobody knows the answers to these things, but it's like this is what's out there, and I'm just asking you it because it's out there. And so I think if you want to address it, you may not.
So I'll address the second one first, and then the first one second. Right? I can't really get into what PWCC's plans were or were not prior to the split of eBay. I just can't. But all I can say is that I don't know as an employee what I am allowed and not allowed to talk about publicly in regards to our long-term plans, because you have to remember there are competitors out there, right? Yeah. So I can't really get into too much of what we were planning to do, not planning to do, so much the contract negotiations with PWCC, because remember, it's a contract, right? And the contracts expire, then to be renegotiated, at time terminals. So I can't really get into too much of that, how that was or was not not going to unfold, one way or the other. There's a multitude of different questions. So that's kind of that. I can't really get into, because that's kind of a rabbit hole. Well, if we were already going to build our own website, and maybe we did or didn't plan on continuing the contract, then people will speculate, oh, well, maybe that's why eBay did this. And I'm not here to paint eBay in a bad light in that aspect, right? Because I don't want to speculate that they had negative connotations for the behavior. That's really left into the minds of each individual. And as a representative for PWCC, I know for a fact that the owners of the company don't want me throwing shade really on anybody else, whether they do us right or wrong. They don't. As an employee, my job isn't to throw shade on anybody publicly at all. So, and I try to honor that wish to bit, and it's hard sometimes.
That's what you should be saying, and so I'm definitely not going to push any further.
right, because it's hard. Because as an employee, me personally,
you have your own.
Well, yeah, because I know for a fact that, dude, I'm a multi-million-dollar collector. It's hard for me not to bid on things that I want to own, right? So when somebody comes and accuses the company I work for of potential shill bidding, like that, or associates of that are currently shill bidding and stuff, or however they're trying to imply it, man, because part of me is like, well, if we're going to get accused of doing this stuff anyway, can I just go ahead and start buying the stuff I want, right? Here I am having to buy from competitors to do the right thing, and then we get cut off from eBay when I know that that's not the case. But yeah, so what our future plans were, I can't talk on that. But what I can talk about is what the market that we're going to unfold in the near future. Period.
So you feel very confident, and that because eBay, I think part of the issue, right, was when eBay released that. I did a live stream with a friend of mine, Nathan, to talk about it, and one question we had, right, was the wording of the eBay thing made it sound like it could be anything from there was one instance of shill bidding ever on one PWCC item that was made from someone unaffiliated with PWCC. It could have been that, which was nothing, or it could have been like the heads of the company have been instructing 100 employees to shill bid every item up. You know what I mean? Like it left.
I promise you it wasn't the latter. I promise you. I promise you it wasn't some type of mass conspiracy. Because here's my thing. I'm going to be completely honest about this. I wouldn't work for a company like that. Like I've got my own brand. People like you brought me because you've been following me. I've got my own brand, and it's based largely on integrity and equal treatment of others, industry first. Well, sorry, hobby first before industry, transaction-based, humanitarian perspectives, truly be passionate, loving what it is you do more than you love the money. That's the brand that Erik Myers has built for him. If I thought for a second that the latter was true, that it was an industry, that the company was corrupt, I'd have told them to kick rocks when they offered me a job. I wouldn't even have contemplated. I'd still do business. Like I'd sell them stuff, buy from their platform because it's stuff I want, right? Like, I mean, that's different. But as far as me going to represent them as a company, hell no, I wouldn't do it in a heartbeat if I thought that they were corrupt. Not in the slightest. But I mean, I've got my own brand, you know, that a lot of people come to me because of integrity, because they know that I honor my word and I'm going to treat them fair. Like I wouldn't want to remotely taint who I am as a person, much less as somebody who's passionate, collector, and enthusiast in the hobby. I would not risk who I am for some company I've worked for like 8-9 months. I mean, that's crazy. Here's the truth. I took a huge pay cut to come work for them from what I made last year in the card industry and the year before. I mean, it was insane. Like it was well over, 70 or 80% pay cut. And I get paid decent there, but I made a good living the past couple of years on cards. Sure. I took a big pay cut to come there because I believe in what they offer the hobby. So I'll leave it at that. Now, what we're planning in the future.
Yeah.
Starting in September 1st, we have the marketplaces back up. So you got buy now best offers, right? Okay. Those will be ready. Our goal is October 1st to maybe the 10th to have the auction.
And this is so for people who have stuff in the vault, right? So I get lots of questions, right, with people who have stuff in the vault who are like, should I pull my stuff out, Jake? What should I do? So for those people, they'll be able to list those items again.
So it's gonna be a bulk. So if your items were listed on eBay before as buy now or best offer, that's just it's gonna instantly go live with your items, however you had them listed before.
Okay.
On the 1st. So you'll get emails between now and then. You will get emails from us saying, hey, we're going back live on our marketplace. Your items were listed. If you had items listed before, the same buy now or best offer parameters are going to go live. And if you want to opt out, if you don't want your cards listed at that price or for whatever reason, you need to opt out of this because it's going to be an instant, hey, everything that was on the marketplace before buy now or best offer is going to go live on the 1st of September. So there are going to be a couple of emails going out saying, hey, this is what's going to happen. If you don't want your stuff being public, buy now or best offer, you need to opt your items out because they're going to go live, right? So if your items are in the vault and were listed previously, they will then be listed come September 1st for buy now or best offer. I believe the items that didn't get sold that were running in August for PWCC, I believe those are going to be scheduled to go live in October. So again, those might need to be opted out if you don't want them to go live, right? So those items that didn't get sold or paid for in August will then be rolled over to October's auction. Our fee structuring is basically the same. So cards that sell for $1,000 and less, it's 1% less than it was on eBay. Before we had a max cap, so any card that sold for $5,000 and higher, we charged 8%. That was our fee structure. Now it's 5 to 10K is 8% and 10K and up is 7%. So for those higher end, those 5-figure items, right? The 10K and up, they actually save 1%. And then the 1,000 and lower, they save 1%, I believe. So on the bottom end and the upper end, those people gain a little. People in the middle, it's the same fee structure, right? So that's where we're at on that. And let me see. We do have another thing potentially in the next few months that our dev team, web development team is working on. I can't really get too much into it, but it'll be embraced widely if we can make it happen to the hobby. It's going to be something that we're working on. But so the platforms we'll still have in October. You'll have flash auction, monthly auction for October. And the premiere, of course, is going to be monthly. And then come September 1st, it's buy now or best offer.
Okay.
So that's the fee structure. I don't even know if that fee structure has been made public yet, but I've been given authority to go ahead and talk about it publicly, what our fee structure is going to be. So that's important. So people want to know, that's going to be it. And we're still going to have auction advances and premier auction advances if people want to do it. If people want to take loans out on their portfolio. So if you got $100K in the vault or $1 million or whatever, we loan up to 40% of value for items. So if you have $100K in our vault, we'll loan up to, it's usually 25-30% of what your market asset value is. So if people want to take loans against your stuff, we'll still do that. We'll still do auction advances and stuff to that effect.
Okay. So does anyone have any last minute questions before I let Erik go relax after a long day? I'll just give it 1 second because usually the chat's a little bit behind, and I just want to make sure there isn't like something, vital that we haven't touched on. So just give it 1 second. But
we're trying to stand by the consumer as best as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, we really are. I mean, again, I wouldn't support PWCC if I didn't believe in it. Yeah, I worked 6-7 days. I think this past week was the first time I actually took like a day and a half off. I didn't work straight 7 days a week. Some days I work 6 hours a day. Some days I work 10, 12. But I traditionally work 7 days a week, for them. So I wouldn't do this kind of effort if I didn't believe in them as a company. Like, I don't need that paycheck,
Yeah. I mean, I view all this stuff as like, it's this blend of business and passion and hobby and, a lot of the stuff we've been talking about. And I think that we want things to, we want everyone to succeed, but also care about us, the collectors, and for it to be a mutual, beneficial growth. So as the hobby grows and as we, continue to become more interested, obviously PWCC makes more money, PSA company makes more money, the Pokemon company makes more money. And I think that it's about us all, being transparent and having communication and not feeling like we are swindling each other. Right. And that's where I think that it gets into that sort of thing of like, is Golden or Heritage or PWCC or eBay, or are they manipulating the market for some sort of short-term gains? And I think what I would say to that is there's also just a lack of market intelligence in that sort of idea, because really all these places are betting and building out infrastructure on cards being very successful, right, for a long time and a long time into the future. And I think a lot of that is built on people on trust, So I think that going back to that sort of capitalist thing, I do think that some of that capitalism can actually help, that there are incentives for all these companies to behave well in the long run. But I do think that it requires people to not go after immediate gratification and for companies to not go after immediate gratification. And what I mean by that is thinking long-term on how to build a really good company and treat their customers well, and maybe not going for short-term, profit or certain things that they could make, and instead, building, trust and things in the long term, even if it loses them some customers, et cetera, in the short term. So we will all be watching to see how that goes. Let me take a look to see if there are any last minute questions. So there are questions about, let's see, like, would PWCC be in favor of like being regulated at all? PWCC, what are they doing to gain the trust back? Buyers trust. Yeah, should buyers trust? All that sort of stuff.
So we are going to vet. So the thing is, before we could vet our buyers for the premier auction, because the premier auction was off eBay, right? So we could so we vetted people. So we've had one unpaid item over the 3 or 4 months we've had premier auctions. There's been one item going paid for. One. That's a huge success rate. Part of the problem is with eBay. What people have to understand is, if you're an eBay customer, you are a customer of ours. Like, we couldn't vet you. We had no control over that. We could only control over who we thought might be a good quality buyer, as they're bidding and maybe their bid history or whatever. It was kind of like trying to work our way through smokes and mirrors, right? Because if you're an eBay customer, if you got an eBay account, you can just bid on our stuff, whatever. So now we can, from moving forward, we can vet people, right? Because you're on our platform now. Now we control it. We can see who's bidding on what. We have better reins. If we don't feel you're honest, or we noticing you're bidding on your own items, or if you have maybe 3 accounts with us from whatever, if you're looking like you're bidding without the intent of purchasing or whatever it may be, we can then monitor stuff better, so we have better reins on that moving forward, So that's one thing that we can do, that we have better vetting capabilities for potential users on our new platform. Because remember, this platform now is going to be ours. It's, we can do a lot of things. Now also, before on eBay, if you bought something and you bought 2 or 3 items, we couldn't split your invoice up. It was one thing. That's just because of how the API worked with eBay. So now we can do that. And now because of eBay, this is another thing people don't realize. If you bought something and you called us and said, yeah, so I won that for 20 grand, but I don't have the money. Can I send 30,000 in cards? It's hard to mark that as sold because your cards you're sending in haven't sold and won't sell for another month or so. Or some people wanted to pay with credit card and bank wire. eBay, if you won things on eBay before, if you didn't pay through eBay, or if you didn't pay according to their API strategy or how the programs are written, it was hard for us to navigate through that. Right now, we can control all that. You can put half on credit card, half on bank wire, or if you want to pay some on cards, some on credit card. We can control all that now. So we now are able to offer more options of payment to our consumers. And before, if you I don't know if you use PWCC, if you bought something to PWCC.
I bought so much off PWCC over the years.
Did you have a vault account?
I don't have a vault account.
Okay, so people that did.
Although I think one was set up for me, and I have like a guy who calls me and checks in on me, and I've thought about
well, one of the complaints we had was eBay didn't have the ability to recognize the shipping address being the same address as the vault address, right? So if you won something from us and you wanted it put in your vault, you had to pay the shipping. And then once it curated, then you would then contact us back, and then we'd refund the shipping. We did that thousands of times a month over, have to refund people shipping because the eBay program didn't recognize the shipping address and the receiving address being the same. So it automatically would charge you shipping. We couldn't do anything about that other than refund you. Now we can just say, hey, look, the recipient who's buying it is putting it in his own vault, boom, free shipping. Like we can just automatically identify that. There's ways of things that are now going to be better than it was before, that we could offer now that we couldn't offer before. And remember, auction houses, the whole show bidding thing, people need to remember this. I didn't think about this until I worked there. To a large degree, they don't care if things go really high or really low. They make the money off the top, right? So if the market is a bull market, you get bigger fees on larger items, but there's less items coming to you because people tend to want to hold because they don't know where tomorrow is going to be, right? On a bear market, people panic sell. So your volume is bigger on the bear market and you make higher profit per item on a bull market. It really evens out at the end from our perspective. An auction house, if auction houses were truly transparent, as long as the item gets paid for, they make their money on the top. That's how they function. Whether it's higher bull or bear markets, it really doesn't matter. They make their money on the top. So their whole goal is to get customers to use their platform. You need people to consign with you. You need people to trust bidding on you. So their whole perspective is to do what's best for both ends of the spectrum, whether it's us or any auction house. That's their goal, So that's what I know. I can't speak for any other auction house. Our weekly meetings, team meetings, are about being fair, just. What can we do to retain customers? What can we do to make people feel more secure?
Yeah, I mean that, Eric, I have a little bit of time buying, and we could probably go more back and forth on that, just because. I mean, if one item goes for like these, the fact that those like Mario Kart games or whatever it was sold for $2 million versus $33,000 a few months ago, and the amount of liquidity and people buying and selling video games has both increased rapidly and the amount they're selling for has increased rapidly. They've made a humongous amount more money than they made on those than they would have a while ago. So, and it's the same thing this year in cards. So the whole Mania bull market has exploded business for PWCC, for eBay, for PSA. So I get the argument that like in a correction from a Mania, maybe with a lot of people selling, there is more liquidity or more people moving, but I have a hard time buying that, because also when a Mania happens and it goes up hugely, you also have a lot of like life-changing money where people, and I had a lot of friends sell collections they never thought they would sell, into the hype because it was life-changing money. So that's interesting that you're arguing that. And I would want to see like the numbers and the analytics on that to really show that it was the same volume being sold, because I mean, I have the analytics on eBay and the volume went up. Like the volume went up so much on collectibles this year, both in amount that were sold and also in the price. So I don't really see how that backs up what you were saying, but maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Yeah, well, it's not the same volume. It's actually on when times are really good, right? The volume at times gets depreciated, right? Versus when times are in a bear market, the volume's actually at times higher. So it's not that the volumes are equal; they're not, right? It's the money, I understand what you're saying.
I'm saying that both, I think, during this bull market, both the volume and the prices that things were selling for were higher than ever. Isn't that true? Yeah. So, but you're arguing that normally in a normal cycle, the volume is actually higher in bear markets, and though prices are selling for lower on average because there's a higher volume, they're still making the same, overall amount, because they don't care what things are selling for. They're just carrying the overall amount that is sold because they make
Now, in this market, the bull market, even now, like people call this a quote unquote micro bear market, right? Because some items are selling lower, and they are, right? Yeah. The one thing I will say is I'm noticing a lot of, and I do like this, right? Especially our clients, like the guy that won the PSA 10 Jordan for $840,000. Like within an hour, he put it on his Instagram that he bought it, he won it, he's paying for it. Because so many people were, because at the time they were selling for like 340, 360, and here's this one sell for 840, but that guy, he had looked at it personally, he had assessed it. I'm not going to get into how many more he has, but he's a collector. And he liked that one. And it wasn't just him. There was multiple people that truly, I believe that's the last one graded. I believe there was a provenance, if I'm right, that they knew that was a recently opened box, that they knew where that box came from. Like that was a very recent pulled card. So the provenance was datable for that card. So, which is important, from a collector's standpoint. But I do see people now that are paying these really high prices for cards that are becoming more public, which is cool because it adds more transparency. And if they become public, people can research that person and say, hey, this is genuinely some dude that might own a roofing company or a plumbing company, or he's in, architecture or whatever. He truly is just a collector and investor that has no ties or affiliations with this card or who sold the card, to where the discrepancies can be removed. And I like that. I'm a dude, when that guy came on Instagram and publicly said, hey, I bought that PSA 10 Jordan, that was huge, because within 30 minutes, we were getting all kinds of phone calls and people saying, oh, was this bid or that bid? To know that guy that won it came out and said, yeah, you can say I was crazy for paying that much, but I did it. And I'm happy with it. I won it and I'm comfortable with it. I like those things, because a lot of these, these cards that are going for decent money, way more than what I expected. I like the fact that more and more people are becoming public on it, but that's their own choice. They're choosing to do it. We're not exposing them to become public.
Last question for you, and then we will end. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything so this is, I think, a good question by Pikachu says, anything that a competitor to PWC has done that you guys, or that you were impressed by, or think that maybe PWCC should adopt? Or is there anything that you feel like PWC, even if it hasn't been a competitor, just something that you think that PWC would improve PWCC into the future?
If I had to pick one, it's card ladder. I like card ladder. Now I'm biased. I don't know Josh really well, but I'm friends with Chris. We call him Chris Hoge, because House of Jordans is what he's known for, right? Because he's a Jordan collector. Chris is a friend of mine, so I'm biased. Now, complete transparency there. I like how much work and effort Card Ladder has put into doing their best to making data sales archive, right? For whether it be through Golden, PWCC, eBay, and they try their due diligence, not just the log sales, to vet sales, to make sure they're accurate sales data, that these are transactions that happened, that were paid for. I think not only us, but every auction house should work in conjunction with Card Ladder. And I know it sounds crazy, I'm about to say, maybe even for free, and to where, hey, we give them all our data for free, what items were paid for, unpaid for, and maybe that in exchange for maybe advertising on their platform or whatever. But I think the analytics and data research of items that are sold and paid for, like legitimate comps, is probably, and I get it, it's probably some of the most valuable data in our industry. But I think that data should also be as readily available to the average consumer as possible. So I love what Card Ladder's doing. If I was an investor and I was putting my dollars into any company in this industry that's new, it'd be Card Ladder. Because without accurate research data, we're all standing on a house of cards. Like the WADA thing, like I said, no pop report. Well, and didn't they also, wasn't there was a platform that kind of tracked sales values that was just shut down and removed? It was bought out and just dissolved?
I'm not sure.
Right. So I think pop reports, now I'm not a grading company, so I have no control on that. But sales data is paramount to the stability and the longevity of whether you call it a hobby or industry. Without accurate, I mean, that's true. That key word there, accurate sales data, we're all standing on a house of cards. And that's true. I mean, I think that's a focal point. Accurate sales data comps, because that's where you can't apply knowledge if you don't have knowledge, right? It's basic psychology, right? You can't apply knowledge to anything in life if you don't first have the knowledge. And that's what knowledge is right there. Is our whole industry is based on comps, whether you agree with it or not. That's a discussion on another day, but you have to have access to it. Knowledge.
Yeah, because that's a great discussion that I talk about a lot, and how I view all of that, and how quickly people jump to comps is a whole nother without thinking and using their brains. But that's a whole, that's a whole nother. There's been rampant, just ridiculous comps in the Pokemon hobby this year that just that's a whole nother thing. Just as with sports, but thank you so much, Erik. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on this channel. Hopefully we can stay in touch. And if you ever need anything from me or anything in the Pokemon world, please feel free to reach out. Let's all thank Erik for coming on and spending time with us. Yeah, absolutely, man. So I'm gonna let you go off of Zoom, and I'm just gonna wrap up with the audience just for a couple of minutes. And then I'm going to get off too, because I also worked all day, and I'm going to relax before bed myself. All right, man. Thank you, dude. Thank you. Bye-bye. All right, guys. So that was the interview and conversation with Erik. So thank you all for hanging out. If someone can do me a big favor, someone in the chat, if you can, because I'm actually not gonna be able to do this right after, if you can, in the comment section of this video after it's up, if you could timestamp when we started talking about PWCC, that would be really helpful, because I think there are a number of people who might want to, skip the sort of philosophical moral conversation and get right to the PWCC discussion. Okay. That would be super helpful just for the audience to because we didn't talk about that for the vast majority of the video, and I think some people might just want to listen to that part. So but so it's definitely interesting. See what some people are saying. Yeah, I mean, so I've heard Erik talk a decent amount, and I just think that I don't know, and I feel like I'm a broken record these days, but again, he's not a childhood friend of mine, so I can't I can't speak to his character, but someone who talks a lot about morality and ethics is a good start and thinks about it and cares about it and tries to act it. Actions are a lot more important than words. And so hopefully all the things that he talks about, he really does. Right. And I haven't gone back through his history to really know that, but I really appreciate his perspectives. I really appreciate him for coming on. And I think that if someone says these types of things and that we should take them at their word until we, have evidence in the contrary. And part of the reason I say that is because I know that there are a number of people in the chat who are kind of, questioning him or feeling like, he was questioning his potential motives and all that sort of thing. And so I just want to give you my perspective on that. And I think he just comes on a channel like this because he loves the hobby. And I don't think there's any sort of agenda. I reached out to him, and I reached out to him really to talk about the sports card market and to talk about his his Kobe collection, which I think is really cool, and to have more of that. And it sort of morphed into us talking about PWCC just because he happened to work there. So, again, that's just for full perspective for all of you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. Hope you enjoyed it. And I will probably have another video for you guys somewhere in the middle of the week. And then I will have another video again next weekend. Okay. A live stream then. All right. So till then, guys, take care.